Show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Well, good evening, and we appreciate you joining us this evening on our broadcast of the Fireplace Show. Now, this week, we're not going to be talking about fireplaces. We're not going to be talking about chimneys. What we're going to be talking about is something that a lot of people have in a lot of rural areas around the country, and there's a lot of interest in these. It's a central heating device, and it's commonly called a boiler or it's called a water stove. There's two different names there. And as I presented this tonight, I thought, okay, who'd be a great guy to bring on here with this? And I thought of my friend here, Tom Urban. And he's out in Fairfield, Iowa. And Tom is a manufacturer. He also is a chimney sweep with a bit long background. Actually, been doing it longer than I was in it, but he started back in 1978. But Tom started actually using one of these appliances, I think about 30 years ago. So, Tom, when did you start using a water stove and how long have you been doing it now?
Jerry, it's probably been 30 years, and I just bought my third one last month. So we've gone through the ups and downs of having them, to putting them in the wrong location. So obviously they're all outdoors. And so we've had our ups and downs with them. The wind blowing your door closed when you're trying to load it, and then I put a building around it, and I got smoked out. And so I've tried a different variety of different things. But my entire building, we've got roughly probably about 10,000 square feet underwater. And what I mean by that is that we have well over a mile or 2 miles of piping throughout this building, and plus my home, part of my home, has some heating in it. So so we've been doing it. We've learned a lot of the ups and downs with it. We've been through replaces. We've been through pump failures. We've been through lines needing to be flushed out. Heat exchangers added, pressurizing systems, isolating systems, and all the things that go along with hydronic heating. Pretty much have been through most of it. So when I got my new one, I was looking for something where we could burn multiple fuels. I was going to go for the gasifiers, but we've also, the interesting part about when you go for energy, Jerry, the hard thing is people think is, oh, I got this really super efficient. I can get 88 or 90% efficiency out of things. And even the same thing with your gas appliances. Unfortunately, they get eaten up by condensate. And so condensate becomes a real issue. I mean, I've literally went through a regular propane boiler, and within 2 years. And did everything I was supposed to do. Put in the added ingredients into the water. I did this, that, whatever, and just the aluminum. Matter of fact, the boiler was shipped back to the manufacturer for verification of what had happened, and they did replace it for me under warranty. So I have gone through the ups and downs with them. So, but this time I decided not to go with the high efficiency on the wood side because of condensate. It's a real concern. You have to have your wood in pristine shape. And from what I'm told, I firmly believe that they work really, really well. But I wanted something with a little bit of give to it, and then also a variety of fuels. So this time when I ordered one up, this one I have is from Crown Royal Stoves. It is a boiler. It's a 7400. So I've got roughly close to 350 gallons of water, in the tank itself. And I have the ability now, I have a shaker grate, I have secondary air systems on the top of the burners, and I also have an but basically a Scotch Marine just style of heat exchanger on top of it. And the reason I did this, I can burn coal, I can burn hay, I can burn biofuel, I can burn wood. I'm going to probably at some point in time, because I am out here in Iowa, I probably will try some corn, see how I make out with it. This boiler is made out of 409 stainless steel. So I think a supplement of corn, not flake corn, in other words, corn stalks and that type of thing. So I'm trying to go for the fiber side of things instead of actually burning coal or burning corn. So this is where I decided to go this time out. I have tried hay, and I put a half a bale into it, and I literally smoked myself out. So, but I did learn my lesson. And so this time now I have straw, and I usually use my starters are now, I put wood down, I put straw down, a little wood on top of it, and like build my cell up, usually by north, south, east, west, as I build it up. And then I just put a little igniter to it, and the fuel and the straw takes off great. It burns really nice. I don't get near the smoke as I got with hay, and so I'm really, I do have a neighbor that's across the road, about 75 or 100 yards away. So I'm trying to be considerate of them too. And, I just don't like seeing smoke coming out. So, like I said, most of the times I can burn pretty clean, but it's just my startup, or if I get wild and crazy and throw some cardboard in and I don't want to recycle, then I have some problems. So,
Well,
it
like I
could
said,
be a problem.
yeah, Tom's been using these for about 30 years, and I sold central boilers for a number of years. And I also use the one to heat my home, my garages, our pool, our everything else here. We heated with one of these appliances also. So we're going to get started in just a minute. We'll be right back with you. Stick around, and we're going to show you some diagrams and different things to look at. So if you want to know about water stoves, tune in. Feel free to share this on your own social media page. It may help someone else. So tonight, what we're talking about is water stoves. They're also called boilers, and these are commonly installed out in people's yards, but some people have them in buildings, and there are also people that put these into their homes and basements and other things. So when we say outdoor a water stove, outdoor boiler, Tom, the name boiler is really inappropriate for this appliance. Would you agree with me? Because it actually doesn't boil water.
Um, you can, but it's not recommended that you do. Usually your top end of these things usually go about 185, 190. At 190, you usually start to get some little simmering with it. So most of the time, my high end, where I lock it out at about 165, 170. That's hot enough to go through it. So yeah, it is kind of a misnomer, Jerry, because but you are boiling water. Well, actually, you're heating water up. So 6 1/2 does another, I guess. So, but in most cases, I guess you could just call it a water stove, because it's not under pressure. The big trick is, I guess, with most boilers is that they are under pressure and they are a closed system. These are not closed systems, so they have to be open to the atmosphere. So for
Right.
that reason, you can't push it, like you can a boiler where you want to put something 3 stories up in the air. You might have some difficulties doing that with these. So unless you have an isolated system, and that's something you start to understand. As far as maintenance on these, Jerry, we've realized that we have isolated every system that we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I probably about eight or nine zones within the buildings themselves. And one of the things we did and I have some line that's pretty close to 30 years old in one of the sections. So what we did is we went ahead and we had to flush the systems, because you can get a bacteria inside your lines if they're open. So we went ahead, reflushed them, cleaned them all out, and then we treated them, and then we put them on heat exchangers and we pressurized them. So this way here, once you pressurize them, you put the proper chemicals and stuff in it, I'm least likely to get any more bacteria growth inside my lines. So we've done that with everything. The only open line right now we have is directly from the building into the shop, which is another heat exchanger, which then goes to the rest of them.
Yeah, and my friend Joe Ingram from California, who I actually know from work, we kind of networked together some. He said I would call the stove because it's on the box and it says it's stove. And and a lot of people look at these. I can remember when I sold them, Tom, and we had them out in front of our retail store, and people would come in and say, "Boy, those are some big smokers you got out there for smoking meat." Other people know. They said, "I didn't know they were building little mini barns with chimneys on them." Now we got a lot of really strange comments if you didn't know what they were when you come up and you seen those sitting in the parking lot, because you're looking at them, you can see they look like little houses. They come in various colors, that kind of stuff, depending on what you want, and they come in different sizes. So you're going to size them for the home that you're going to put into it. So what we want to talk about tonight is, how do these appliances work, and what's the good sides, what's the bad side. We're going to tell you the good things about them, and you could talk about it. And Joe just said you could smoke the whole cow at once in that thing. Yeah, Joe, you could. But I think when you see what this thing is doing, it probably ain't gonna give you no really good Kansas City barbecue out of this animal, more than likely out there. So, but that's what they are, and they set away and they set out in the yard. Now, Tom, one of the things when I installed them is we always wanted to install it a distance from the house. How far is yours from your house out there?
Probably about 65, 70 feet, and from the other building about 55. Yeah, they're a little bit away.
Right. So this is one of the things to keep in mind. And this is what one of the problems is. If you live in a subdivision and you got a quarter acre lot, you're probably going to have some upset neighbors with this, Tom. Would you agree that that's probably not where you want to put one of these water
Yeah.
stoves?
Yeah, that if you could get it, and having used one for a variety of years, Jerry, you can get it down. You're burning pretty clean the whole time. But again, the other problem you're going to have with it, you're going to have a bit of an odor to it.
Yeah.
And so if you're only going to use like 2 or 4 foot a stack on top of it, you're gonna be blowing it all over the yard, and your neighbors are not gonna like you very much.
Yeah.
Unless you put like 25 foot of chimney on top of it, and strap it down so that and hold it in place. And get it up high enough, then maybe you might not have any difficulties. But I really don't see this as something that I would want to have in a residential area.
Yeah. And Joe just put in there, if you're 60 foot away, that's 3 houses away. So more than likely, where my buddy Joe lives is not where you want to be using one of these monsters. But we're
No.
going to take you through and show you what they do, what they look like, and how they operate in tonight's show. So just stick around with us, and we're going to be here. Let me get my next photo framed up here and go there. So what we're talking about here is predominantly these are hot water systems. Now, if you look, I've also got one that does hot air, but commonly you don't see hot air models. Tom, have you ever seen one that actually heated air, or have they always been water, what you've seen out there in Iowa?
I have seen a few air, Jerry. The problem is that usually they have to put them closer to the building. So you've got, I'd probably say, anywhere between a 12 to a 16-inch duct going in out of it, going over into the house. So it's a relatively short distance. So that's it. Other than that, though, most of what I've seen, Jerry, have been water.
Correct. So look at the one on your left you're seeing, and what we have here is basically a firebox that is completely surrounded with water with a chimney coming out of it. And these chimneys, some of them come out the center, some come out the back, they're rear vented, depends on the design of the unit. Now in your Crown Royal, does your chimney come out the rear of the stove, or does it come out the top, Tom?
It comes out. My central came out the back, Jerry, was easy to clean. This one here is going to be a little bit more demanding. It's up in the center, so it has to come up, go around. So, but luckily enough, the way the door is set up, I can open the door and I can slide the brushes and stuff on the top of it, and I'll find a way to sneak a brush up there and sweep it out.
Right. And usually you're going to find a release cap up on top where you could fill it with water. But if you made steam, if it brought to boiling, that's where the water is going to come out when it expands and comes out the cap, or if you fill too much water in it. Now, if you want to add water to yours, Tom, have you got a valve that runs the water directly into the tank so you don't have to take a hose pipe out to it?
I did on the last one, Jerry. I haven't had a chance to put one on this new one. I just ran. I have a spigot that's less than 50, about 50, 60 feet away. So I filled it up with water, just with the garden hose. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah,
But I do
that's
have,
what.
yeah, I do have another way I can do it inside the shop too. I forgot about that. I have my central, one of the circulators, the pumps that runs back and forth. We put a double hose bib on it. I can screw a hose onto it and turn the thing on and fill it right from there. So I can do it 2 ways.
Well, I had a valve in my basement, so when I need to add water, I would actually just open up the hose bib, and then it
Yeah,
would run directly in and just fill the tank up right from there without having to drag any
yeah,
hoses or whatever. But that's one of the considerations is these of how are you going to get the water into it. Now,
yeah.
this one is showing an ash pan. Now, mine did not have an ash pan. And Tom, do you have an ash pan in that ash pan in your Crown Royal?
Yes, I do, and that was another reason why I opted to go with Crown Royal over Central Boiler. Although my oldest Central Boiler because it had the downflow application. You had to unbolt the thing, pull the door off of it, and then you had to scoop out your fly ash. And I got old and tired and cranky and irritable, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. So, and I wanted the ability to do multiple fuels, so that's why I went with the Crown Royal. And yes, there is an ash pan in that. Just slide it out, dump your ashes, and put it back in. Close the door, and you're off running again.
Can one man handle that pan of ashes, or does it take two people?
If you I'm starting to get in a habit with this one, knowing it's how the burning characteristics, Jerry. I probably do it every other day, and it's not full. I let it go once and it filled up, and it took a little bit for me to pick it up and get it over there. So now that I know what I'm looking for, I don't let it go for a week and a half or something. I make sure it's done about every other day, and I'm good.
Got you covered. Now, here's the first question. Do these units use a lot of wood? Well, the amount of wood you're going to use is going to be dependent upon the amount of area that you're going to heat, because the more area that is, like in our house, we're a little over 6,000 square feet in the house. And then we had a 4-car garage. We had a 2-car garage. We heated our pool with it, and we would heat the pool into the late fall, and we would start it up every year in March. So we used a lot of wood for those purposes. We also heated all of our domestic hot water. Do you heat your domestic hot water with your unit, Tom?
Not at this time, Jerry. Probably in the future I will.
Okay. So, Tom, you're heating again, you said about 10,000 square feet. So, what is an annual wood usage that you have there at your property?
I usually try to. Unfortunately, my wood guy just retired this year, and I have hopefully enough to get me through this year. But as a rule, Jerry, I buy it by the tractor trailer, processed, ready to go for me, and so I get relatively about anywhere between 10 to, if I'm really going to get heavy into it, probably go back up to 12 full quart a year.
Okay. And then you're out in the country. So your only other alternatives to heat there are going to be using propane, or you're going to be using an electric, which would be extremely expensive with either of those,
Yeah.
or putting in a solar system that would also be pretty expensive for you, wouldn't it be?
Yeah. So I actually, Jerry, if I've talked to a number of my friends who we either have boilers, have been in HVAC businesses over the years, and probably my next thing I'd probably would do would be working on trying to get 1,000 to a 5,000 gallon tank that I could put in the ground, insulate it, and just sit there and constantly just feeding the water into it. That way you run unlimited. You don't have to worry about your boiler dropping down, because all you're doing is dumping the heat into it. And accompanied, if I put some hot water, some solars into it, I probably could be able to get by with a long duration of time. It just takes a lot of water to pull that off.
Got you covered. Okay. So, and there's another question goes on, Tom, which is what happens if you run out of wood? Now, on some of these units, you can buy backup propane and backup natural gas burners to actually take over, and also to use to start the unit up. Now, I never had that, but we did sell it as an option. And another thing is the pressed logs that you see to the right up there. So what kind of backup do you have? Have you got a propane backup burner on yours, or is it just wood, or what do you do if you run out of wood?
Jerry, being back when I swept chimneys in Pennsylvania, I did these multi-fuel things. They were terrible. I mean, they were tough to clean, tough to keep adjusted. And as far as the efficiency factor, if you were burning either oil or gas in them, was really pretty bad, because they were designed for bigger boxes. So containing or coming up with a flame pattern, all you're doing is like shooting this thing into this large tank, and it really, efficiency wise, it was really pretty low. So I have 3 boilers. Wait a minute. 1, 2. I have 3 boilers, and I have 1 hot air system. So I can run independent of either one of them. So if I don't have any wood, these guys all kick in. I've got 180,000 hanging on the wall over here, and another one that's another 200,000 in another room, and I have a hot air furnace inside the house. They're all condensing furnaces, or furnace or boilers, and so that is my backup. And I found that to be the most efficient and the most expensive to put up. But once I have it, then I don't have to worry. I do get the 90 plus when I'm running on both of them. So
Okay. So have you ever used the press manufactured logs, which is basically sawdust waste that's been pressed into logs? Have you ever used that in your boiler?
I've used the small brick ones, Jerry, like the 12 or 13 inch ones by 4x4, something like that, as they use it for starters. I can get those out here relatively easy. I have not seen these guys that you're showing me over here of yet here in the Midwest. So it'd be kind of interesting to do that. To see how they would work. The ones I have used, the smaller ones, they put out some serious heat. They do a nice job.
Okay, so it is something you have used and it
Yeah.
will work as far as that's concerned. So
Yeah.
you just throw them in there, you stack them in there like you lay in brick, or how do you put them in?
I try to do the same thing. I just run a course, east south, or east west, and then I try to run another course up, and I try to leave myself a space. That's kind of interesting that you mentioned that. If you really kind of get into this, and you can run courses apart. I mean, try to keep them anywhere about 2 inches or so, or about the same width as a brick apart, and you lay those things in there across there. Once you get those things going, your air fuel mix gets really, really good, and you really throw out some serious heat. And the other nice part about it is you don't see anything coming out of the stack. It's just clean. And if it's really cold, all you're going to see is water condensate coming out.
Okay, so now next slide I got up is dealing with your water quality and the chemicals that you use. And I want to put a big caution in here. This is of the utmost importance for the life of that appliance. And you also have got to check the pH of that water on occasion. So you have different chemicals that you use. Now, in preparation for this show, I actually interviewed a man that sold boilers for a number of years. And I asked him, I said, well, what did you find was the primary reason when a boiler had a shortened life? And they said it came from, number one, improper chemicals. They didn't check the water going into it. They didn't check the pH, or it was also they were using junk fuel. In other words, they were burning the garbage and everything else in there. So, Tom, in your opinion, how critical are the chemicals that you add to this water? Because you're going to be using the same water over and over in the heating system, circulating it through your heat exchangers.
Your gentleman's quite correct. It's real critical. I came, this close to having some bacteria growth in one section of our house, and it took it was expensive to have somebody flush it all out. And so I do. I think the really interesting part about this, Jerry, is when I emptied my central boiler out, I was kind of interested to see what my water was going through it. And I was pretty religious about keeping, every year I test it, go in, bring it in, do my pH test, do my nitrate test to see how it worked out. And at first I didn't think it was that big a deal, but then after I got, scared to death about, having to eliminate in-floor heat and concrete, I started to get really, staying on top of it. And surprisingly enough, when we emptied up the 300 gallons out of that central boiler, from the time we opened it up until the last drips that came out, I had no sediment inside it. The water was crystal clear the entire time. And so I was like, so I plan on anticipating I'm going to refurbish that boiler. I'm going to set it up in we're going to put up another addition over next door. And when we do, I'm going to put the thing back up on there, because I'll refurb the brick and inside it and start it up, because the inside of it was absolutely crystal clear. The water, there was no sediment whatsoever.
Right. And a lot of people may not know this, but many of these, and I would say most of them, the fireboxes are actually made out of mild steel. They're not made out of stainless steel. Now, you said a while ago that your Crown Royal does have stainless steel construction.
Yeah, the whole thing's 409 stainless.
But when you had the central boiler, that was a mild steel
Yes, it was
construction. And you just said, how many years did you use your central boiler?
I had that one for 11 years.
So you had it for 11 years, and whenever you drained the water, you had no rusty looking water coming out, no sediment. So the firebox is still in good shape as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, it's still in good shape.
Right. Now, something else is on here. You'll see I've got one, which is a chemical treatment for wood. It's called Creaway. But there are a lot of different treatments that you can put into these, because they will make what we call a glaze type creosote buildup, especially the older models. So we recommend that you use something. Creaway is a good one. ACS is another one. But there's a lot of different chemicals that you can add to the fire that will cause the creosote to not build up as a glazy, combustible type creosote. Now, on your units, Tom, do you see this glazy buildup on the interior of the firebox much?
On the new Crown Royal, I'm not seeing any whatsoever. Like it's only been a month, but what I have had in here, Jerry, I'm pretty impressed. It's pretty much just fly ash and a little bit of. I don't see any glazed creosote. On the central boiler, because I have a downflow application, the actual chamber is cold because in essence you got this hot fire that's being directed at the bottom. The rest of the firebox is cold, and when it's cold, guess what creosote does? It sticks to it. So I would constantly be building creosote in the central boiler. And obviously then open the door and scratch it off a little bit. And next thing you know, you got a rip roaring fire because you're taking because you'd build glaze every day. I did try and use some Creaway, and it was really surprising how much it would dry it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just got crazy with it a couple times and just kept taking a bottle at a time because the chamber's so big, and I just sprayed all inside there, and especially in the heat exchanger area, and it did a really nice job drying it out. So I was
Right.
impressed.
And when that firebox catches on fire, Tom, I called it a fire breathing dragon because I'm gonna tell you what, you hold the door open, I'd
Oh
have
yeah.
flames coming 4 to 6 foot out the front of that thing. That's one of the reasons I would be kind of leery about putting one of these in a building because of the way that the fire can come out that door.
Yeah, that's what I had. I read just mine was in a steel garage. You know those what they call the little carport things they sell that in various places. That's what I had. Mine was an 18 by 22, and so there was no wood or anything in the building whatsoever. But it was all steel. But it got all charred and smoky and stuff from in there. And I was going to put a stack over top of it, but I didn't have enough supports to do it. And as time went by, I said every year I was going to do it, and I never did it. And so finally, I said, "The hell with it." And I took the building down. Just bought a bigger park and call it a day. So yeah, so I've tried. Yeah, and but you're right, Jerry. There's a couple of times I'd open that door up and wow, man, you could do some serious. You could definitely shoot 3-4 foot flames right out of the front of that box. No
Yeah.
problem at all.
At night, we really didn't need any lights up there at the wood pile. We usually got enough light out of that boiler if we opened it. It was like a great big flaming torch coming out the front of that thing sometimes some nights up there. So now,
We affectionately called it Gehenna.
right. Now, what I'm showing you now, this is a very, very important part of the installation. And this is also a very expensive part of the installation. And what you're looking at is you're seeing what's called insulated PEX pipe. And what you're seeing two pipes inside of that plastic outside layer and then insulation between the points because those two lines, one is your supply line running to wherever your heat exchanger is, and then the other one is delivering the water back to the boiler. Now, I don't know about your system, Tom, but when we sold them, we always looked at that we should never lose more than 20 degrees in the travel. In other words, if the water was 180 degrees leaving the boiler, we wanted it to be no less than 160 when it returned, because if you didn't, your recovery was going to be such a long time, you were going to go into cold spells.
Yeah.
What do you know what yours is rated to do, or what's advised to be done on yours?
When I put it in, a 12. Yeah, let me think. The boiler. It's probably 20 years. When I put the piping in, Jerry, it's probably 20 years, maybe even longer. Maybe it might even no, is it 30 years? Anyway, it's been a number of years. And at that time, they were just barely coming out with this new material they have out now, and it was super expensive. So what we ended up doing was taking to 1 inch, cross link PEX pipe, and we got with at that time all we had was insulating tarp. So oh yeah, two 1 inch lines like this. We had like this much. What I dropped in the ground, 4 foot in the ground, was probably about this big. But we had wrapped that tarp around it and around it and around it in 25-foot sections. Then we taped it all together, dropped it in the hole, and did it that way. And I have measured mine a couple times, and I lose about 4 or 5 degrees.
Yeah.
And
Now is
here's the interesting part too, Jerry. Though, but it takes until if I'm burning really, really hot, if it's a cold winter, it will take probably into February, over a month, or 2 months, that I'll start to see the snow melt above where the line is.
okay. And that's one of your signs is when you start seeing that wherever that is trenched underline, that's
Mhm.
telling you that that's some of the heat that you're losing because
Yeah.
these lines are usually going to be buried going to the house. So that's going to be part of the installation, is burying these lines, like I said, and
Yeah.
depending on how many zones you're going to. And when I say the word zone, every heating appliance you're connecting to is a zone. Now, you may run and split inside the house and run 2 appliances out of 1 zone. It kind of depends on how that's where, and we're going to talk about who to hire to do this installation and design this whole system before we get out of this. But this is what you call hydronic heating. And what you've got to do, there's a whole lot of really in-depth knowledge that's got to be known in order for this to be installed properly. Tom, do you agree with that statement?
Yeah. Yeah. I luckily enough, I was able to put mine in, Jerry, but I had a lot of help. You know,
Yeah,
I
a
had
lot of help. Okay.
I had neighbors that were the hydronic supply places. So when I needed a question or answered, they were the ones that I went to, and then so they're my neighbors, and they're great.
Right. So I just took a sample of a water stove with the back cover off, and you can see inside of there, and it's going to depend on the appliance of how many outlets you're going to have. Now, the one that I had was the largest central boiler, and there were 3 supply lines that came off of there that we then split into other segments as it left the unit there. But that's how it's done, and you're going to have pumps in the system. Now, when you do the installation, what we were always taught, Tom, was the pump always went at the lowest point in the system. Now, my boiler was up on a hill behind the house, so we had no pumps sitting up at the unit itself. All the pumps were down at the appliances, which were much lower. Is that the same understanding you have?
Yep. Yeah. My pump is right on the floor.
Okay, so the pumps are down. The pumps
Mhm.
always go at the lowest point. So you're taking gravity to feed to them, and then you're pumping back to the water stove, back to the
Right.
boiler, whatever you're going to call it. Now, the unit I had a set aquastat on it. And what the aquastat did, it was measuring the water temperature. And the water temperature in that tank was what told the draft to open and close. Mine was set at a 160 and 180. When the water got to 180 degrees, then the aquastat told the draft door to close and stop burning. When it dropped to 160, then the draft door opened back up and allowed more air into the appliance. And then we had a blower on the intake that forced air into the firebox. How does yours set, Tom?
Mine, let's see. This one here is set up with a digital control on it, Jerry. So I just set my high, and it'll just it'll go down, and and as soon as it drops 5 or 10 degrees, the thing turns back up on, and tries to go back and keep it at 165.
Okay.
What I do like about this with this one with the Crown Royal is I can adjust, go out and adjust my fan speed. That's a biggie. I know Central, I think, has now got their setup. You can use your cell phone and build an app, and you can set it accordingly if you want to. That's another way to do it. But I'm a little bit old school. I just it's only not that far away. Go out there, and it has a range. I just set it in a range and let it go. And if I need to get some heat going, crank those fans up, and I'll tell you what, it'll about a minute or so. I got flames shooting out of that thing pretty good. So
Right. So the
it's nice.
fan that you're talking about, that is a draft inducer that
Yeah.
is forcing air into the firebox. Am I correct?
It's doing it in 2 ways too, Jerry, which is kind of nice. Because if you're going to burn coal or biofuels and stuff with it, I have a shaker grate system built into it, so I can run air. The main fan is underneath the shaker grate, so I think it's running like about 230 CFM goes underneath the shaker grate, which you can increase and decrease. Plus, there's another one that's at 50 or 60 CFM that runs a set of tubes across the top of the fire. So once you get your fire going, if there's any smoke or any heated gases that are there, that thing adds the top air on top of it to do your secondary burn.
Got you covered. So you're setting the one you have, you're setting a lot of this up through your digital controls.
Right.
And the one I had was more of a set at the factory type. So it's going to
Right.
depend on the manufacturer of exactly what you're going to do, what you're going to have as far as, because a lot of them use natural draft. They don't even have a fan on it to establish that draft. In fact, my central boiler, when I was selling those, they didn't have a fan. The fan was an option that you could buy to go with it. But
Right.
without the fan, you had a much slower time of getting the fire going. With the
Yeah.
fan, it's going to take it up and move it out at a whole lot faster rate of
Oh yeah.
speed.
Yeah, it really
Okay.
does.
So here we've got a couple different things that you're going to use. And the first is what you see there is the pump, because you're going to have a pump for every appliance. Every different zone is going to have pumps. So if you had a water heater, domestic water heater sitting next to a hot air furnace, each of those would have a pump. And that's going to be a lot of the cost is all of these pumps that you're going to have on this system. You're going to have aquastats. Now, what Tom is telling you about, he can set the temperature of his. The aquastat is like a thermostat, but it measures water temperature. You're also going to have a thermostat. This is what's going to control the temperature in your house, because your furnace blower is going to cut on and off, or you're going to regulate the pumps depending on what you have to set that. You also have what we call a hydrant or a boiler tap, and that is where you can release the air out of the system, because the system will at times vapor lock, especially if you shut it down in the summertime, you might develop air. So you're going to have some boiler taps, which that's what the hydronics people call them. We probably call it a faucet or something like that. But that is to let air out of the system in case you get air. Because if you've got air in the system, Tom, it's not going to pump, is it?
No, it's not. It causes a lot of a lot of difficulties. You feel some heat, but then you don't feel the heat. What's going on? And yeah, you have to. And each one of these is on your extension tubes, or however you set up your system. But that's what they're designed for. I've got most of the things I have for turning things on and off are all gate valve, Jerry. But I think I have 2 or 3 of these in the system and high points. So in the beginning of the year, I go out and I go make sure I'm doing okay. I just reach up and just crack it a little bit and see if I hear any gurgling or any sounds, or if it shoots out with water right away. Know I'm good to go and be on my merry way.
Right. And what you just said was these go on the high points in the system, because that's where the air is going to go to.
Yep.
And you could have air trapped up next to that boiler. And if you don't have a way to release that air, now you're on pretty flat ground there in Iowa, aren't you?
Yeah.
And versus my house, I'm built on a hill. So that was probably a 20, 25 foot elevation from where the actual appliances were up to where the boiler, the water stove was actually positioned at my house. So is there anything you want to add about any of these parts that are going to be used on this time?
Pumps, usually the ones you've got, I don't know, that looks like a B&G. Yeah, it's a B&G pump. Most of the ones I have, I've had several kinds. I have Taco. Now I have Honeywells. Um, I've had some other Aqua something or others, and most of them are cartridge, and they're surprisingly. I get probably 2 years, and I'll have one of the pumps start to go bad, and it's really pretty simple. Valves get closed. Unbolt the outside cartridge, take it off. The cartridge is bad, replace with a new cartridge, put it back on, lock it back in place, turn the valves open again, hit the thing, and boom, off she goes. So they're relatively easy to fix and repair. Some guys, in other words, I think a lot of folks have gone over to using pumps. Long back in the early days, they're using zone valves, and sometimes zone valves would open, sometimes they wouldn't. This way here with a pump, you're less likely to have those issues. So keeping
Right.
water going it's a big deal.
Right. Now, what you also need is at these junctions where this pump is you need cutoff valves on this line, because if you don't have a cutoff valve and you take that pump off, if there's 50 foot of water between up in that boiler, that 50 foot of water is coming right down on top of you, isn't it, Tom?
Especially with you, if you're 25 foot up, you got some serious head pressure there, Jerry.
Yes,
You
sir.
open that valve, but you better have a bucket or a hose because it's coming out of there pretty fast. Yeah.
And you ain't going to stop it. And then that's where
No.
also that's where the boiler taps come into place, because once you
Yes.
put it back in, we now got to release that air out of there, or it's not going to be pumping good. It will be running, but there's nothing circulating through the system, so we got a problem there.
Yeah.
So, and what you're looking at now is various kinds of heat exchangers. If you look up there at the right, we have what's called a water to air heat exchanger. And this is what's used in a duct system or as a hanging heat exchanger, where the hot water goes through that coil and then a fan blows through the fans just like you would in your automobile or in your air conditioning. On the left-hand side, we have a water to water heat exchanger. And that's what's used on your domestic hot water or on your spa, on your swimming pool. you're going to have that type of flat plate heat exchanger, which is a water to water. Now, I also said swimming pool. Now, whenever you are dealing with a swimming pool, you also want to make sure that these heat exchangers are marine grade. Because if you don't have marine grade, you'll see that heat exchanger has 4 different inlets. Because what we're doing is on one side, we are pumping the water from the boiler through the system and then it goes back. On the other side, we're pumping the water from the swimming pool coming out of the swimming pool filter, which has a lot of chlorine in it. And then it returns back to the pool as the heated water. So when you're doing these flat plate heat exchangers for a swimming pool or a spa, then you're going to need to make sure it is a marine grade, which will probably double the cost of those heat exchangers. So, Tom, anything you want to add about heat exchangers right there?
I have both of them. So
Okay.
downstairs, I have that one. I probably have, I think there's one, two, I have three or four or five plate heat exchangers now. Yeah, probably at least that much because we've isolated as much as we can so that each system is separate.
So you've got boilers or the actual heating appliances. So you are exchanging that boiler
Mhm.
water from your household system is going through the heat exchanger while the outdoor unit is pumping on the other side through that flat plate. And then what a heat exchanger does, it moves the heat from one of those water sources to the other water source. Am I correct?
Yeah, and that's the real key thing. When I lost that boiler in just a few number of years, the manufacturer was trying to wonder where the added water was, where if we were just using it as an isolated system, and we told them we were honest with them. Said no, we have an outdoor boiler that's running through that. So we said, well, we're going to go ahead and do this for you, but you're going to have to pay to have a plate heat exchanger put in, and we did it. We put it in, and that way there the chemical contents and stuff, because there's aluminum block heat exchanger in the boiler. So that's got like a row guard or something like that we put into it, and it has a specialty fluid. So that water from the outdoor boiler has to go through that one if it wants to heat the water where that one is. So yeah, they're totally separate systems.
And again, this is where actually, when you're doing the design, you need someone that's very experienced
Mhm.
in hydronics to make this whole system work properly, or you may be doing it over again if it doesn't. And this is an awful expensive experiment to not do it right. Okay, so now what you're looking at is where on the left we have what's called a radiant floor system. And in a radiant floor system, that's what's used in a lot of very cold climates in the northern part of the United States. Tom, you may have radiant floor heating out there, but what we're doing is we're actually running that water from the boiler through those tubes in the floor, and then it heats the floor up, and then the heat rises from there. So, do you have a radiant floor system in any of your buildings?
Right now, where I'm sitting, this floor here has 3,100 lineal feet of tubing in the floor. So yeah, so everything. The interesting part, this is a lot of work, and it takes some expertise to make this all work. But I'll guarantee you, I don't like leaving here in the wintertime because the heat that comes out of the floor and just everything permeates with it. We have CNC machines that are the big cast iron, and about end of January, you can go up and touch the machine, and the machine's warm because the radiance. It's on the radiant floor. It comes up through the machine, and actually the CNC machine or drill press or whatever, or brake or shear is actually warm. So the heat. I mean, you get. I don't know. I could get this up to 80 degrees, and put sand out here and give me an umbrella with a drink on it and a palm tree, and I'm good. I mean, it is really really great heat. Is
Yeah,
without drafts to it. It's really super heat. So
right.
it's worth it.
Yeah. On the left-hand side, you're looking at a hanging heat exchanger. And what that has, that piece is made for a garage
Mhm.
where here we're pumping the water through the heat exchanger like we showed you earlier. And then there's a fan that cuts on. These were the units that I heated my garage with, Tom, where we would actually run the water in. It ran off a thermostat. So whenever the unit got down low, the pump came on. Then when the heat exchanger was warm, then the fan cut on, blew the air through the heat exchanger, and that's how we heated our garages. Have you got any hanging heat exchangers in your whole Ponderosa out there, brother?
No, I'm all radiant floor, except for in the house where I have it go up to my return air is where I have the other radiator. So my return air is heated as it goes up through because there's
Okay.
no other place to put it because the A coil was taking it over. So yeah,
Okay. So when you look here, now I've got other heat exchangers here. So what you're looking at, you can see the flat plate with showing you where the hot water comes in and the warm water goes out and returns back. You see we have both a blue side and we have the red side in that. Then we've got heat exchangers on the right hand side, and that's what's commonly placed into the ductwork and when you have a furnace. Now you don't have any furnaces on your system. Am I correct?
my house has a furnace, and that's where
Okay.
we use that. And mine there was no room to put over the A coil, so we put it in the return. So
Okay.
it's
So
on a floor. Yeah,
right. Well, here where I live, we had all furnaces, so we had the heat exchangers in the ductwork, like you're looking at right there. That's
right.
how the system was heated. That's how we got our heat into the home. The furnace fan comes on when the heat is demanded. The pump comes on, then the air blows through the heat exchanger and delivers it through the ductwork around the house. That's
Mm.
how our system worked here in our house. So, what can you heat? Well, Tom's telling you about all the different things. And in our situation, we ran three furnaces off the system. We ran one 60-gallon domestic hot water heater. We ran a swimming pool. We heated a 2-car garage and we heated a 4-car garage off of one unit. So, Tom, what about you? How many different buildings or systems do you have there?
Um, let's see. I'm just trying to look on the wall right now. I've got there's yeah I've isolated the systems. We're like I said about 10,000 total, Jerry. But right now I'm in an area that's about 4,000 squares. So this has four zones in it. I have another area 30 by 30 that's got one zone. Other smaller rooms have one zone, but they're all linked together in either a manifold. And from there, the pumps turn on for each one of them. So when a thermostat calls, it calls that pump, and that pump turns on until it satisfies the thermostat.
Right.
So
Now, I've also got a picture there of a spa because you can actually hook these up. Now, I had a client that put one in his house, Tom, and he had a water garden and he had very expensive koi in the water garden. So
wow,
he actually heated his water gardens with the koi to keep the koi alive in the wintertime. So he had heated water gardens in his backyard.
that's cool.
It really is. But
That's cool.
again, it all depends on what you want to do with them. But that was one of his desires whenever he put the system in, is he wanted to he put a fortune in his water garden and he had some very expensive fish. So he installed this to keep the water garden warm. And since he was doing it, he figured might as well run it to the whole house at the same time. But the primary
Yep.
role was to keep the fish from dying. Okay. So Tom, here we go. This is a good one, Tom,
Yeah, it
because
is.
actually that photo on the right is your unit. Am I correct?
That's mine. Yep.
Okay. And on the left, what you're looking at here is an older model. And this is the way that they belch smoke on a lot of these older units. And we're going to talk about EPA in a minute and where these are not allowed and where they've been outlawed. But Tom, on the newer units, that was a picture taken earlier today. That is your unit in operation right now. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's it.
So as you can see, there's very little smoke coming out of this unit versus the one to the left. Tom, that's how mine looked a lot of times. What about your older ones?
Like I say, the only way I could do that, Jerry, was I put way too much hay inside it. That I got I got that same effect. Or if I put cardboard in. Most of the times, like we recycle most of our cardboard, but once in a while, it's just either between cycles for them to fill it or the bin's full. I'll take some out and I'll throw them in there. But if I throw too much in, that's the effect. But I'm surprised with this newer one. I'm not getting near the smoking issues that I had that I could have run with Essentials. So whether it has to do, I kind of like the idea that flame pattern that like goes back and forth and goes out. I think it gives me an extra attitude. And something I do if some that does happen, Jerry, lots of times I'll open the door, like I'll turn my fan off and I'll open the door just a little bit or crack it and just let it sit there for about 20 minutes. And I can probably clear it up like a third the time it would if I just left it alone. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty if I see it, I'm here all the time. If I see it belching smoke, I just go out and crack a door and find out why it's smoking, and then plan accordingly.
Well, behind my house, my unit was back in the woods, and people used to call used to call the fire department. And the fire department actually knew what I was doing. They said, "Oh, it ain't the woods on fire. That's just Jerry's boiler back there going." Because that's what people ride down the road and they think there was a thing there. So, James, I'm seeing your question. I'm going to bring that up in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up right now. Tom, we've got James Owens on here, and
Hey,
he's got
James.
a question coming in, which is how they are outlawing wood burning in New York State. So actually, what they are outlawing, James, because I've done some research in the last couple of days on this, is they are outlawing any outdoor boilers up there like we are talking about tonight. Many of these are now going to be outlawed there and in other states, but that wood burning ban does not extend to fireplaces, nor does it extend to
Wood stoves.
fireplaces or wood stoves or anything like that. It is strictly on these animals because they've got a pretty bad reputation. We're going to talk about EPA and these units and legal and local ordinances shortly. But the older units, they smoked a lot. Tom, you said that was one of the reasons you upgraded yours was to get less smoke.
I wanted better efficiency, Jerry. My first one was only like about 60% efficient, and when I went to the central boiler, I was up around 85. And like I said, like they tell you to do, if you put in the wood, put in good quality wood, nothing wet and soaked up, and don't throw garbage in, because some folks think, well, hey, I don't care, just go out there and throw it and burn it. No, you got to treat it like it's a burner, not a garbage dump. So
Right.
it's like garbage in, garbage out. You put garbage in there, it's going to give you that stuff coming out. And I like mine so much. I'm very kind of particular. If I see it smoking, I'm going like, what's going on? And usually it's cardboard. So what's starting up after that, she cleans right up. And I'd probably say a good 85 to 90% of the time my boiler's going, that's what you see coming out of it.
Yep. So it's a very
Yeah,
clean
it's pretty
burning
clean.
unit of what you got today, right?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, let me get I got to get back to my other screen here to switch it over. So, yep, hung up here. Give me a minute. Sorry about this. I'm on two screens here, Tom, so I got to get the other PowerPoint up. There we go.
There you go.
Now, clean burning technology. So, Tom, this is what a lot of the newer units look like inside. This is where we have different types of afterburners where they are taking and burning the smoke up where it's not exiting. Now, this is something you're more familiar with in the boilers than I am. So, what can you kind of describe what's going on here? Because it looks like the fire's going down. So, tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
That's the one you have on my left here, Jerry, is a central, and central's idea is to run air over top into the box through the wood and then go into what they call a ceramic turbulator or whatever, and that thing gets mighty hot. And so now they have a door on it. Mine used to be was bolted, but then the air and the fuel are brought together into one hot spot, which is in a ceramic tube. Then after that, it shoots out the back, and it goes back up and goes through another heat exchanger, which is a series of plates and tubes that you either have fire tube or you have water tube. I think these now are water tube, and which means that the water's inside, and then the water goes back and through it, and then the fire goes around it, and then it goes back out the top of your chimney. So that's how they work. The other one on the right side, that looks like the crowns, and crowns are the same thing. But their fire comes across the top, goes back down, and goes into a series of fire tubes, and it goes back up out the back of the boiler. The trick is you're trying to get the smoke and the gases to turbulate as much as possible as you go through it. That's why the easiest way in the wood stoves on the new style wood stoves, if they're not using catalytic converters, that's why they insulated the plates and put air underneath there so that you'd heat the plate up and the air would be supercharged, and when you added the air to it, it would then burn. That's what causes that beautiful roll in front of your fireplaces and stuff. That's ideally what's happening here, only on a huge a much bigger area, and producing a lot of heat. Where wood stoves, you're doing like 40 to 60,000 BTUs. These things here are doing 150, 200, or in case of mine, I can do over 400,000 BTUs. So it's just doing it on a larger scale is what they're doing.
Right. So as you're looking, we're going to be talking about EPA and the different regulations in just a little bit on this program. But this is what you're seeing available. This is how you're going to be able to clean up the smoke. You're not going to have the fire department marking you as a local resident that commonly has their woods on fire and that kind of stuff, like I used to go through with these things. So again, who's the best person to plan and do the installation? And my advice is locate a local expert in hydronics and boilers. And hydronics is heating and using water to transfer the heat. Tom, would you add anything to this of anybody else you know that you should call to?
Yeah, I'd say you definitely got to find if you're an installer of them. Usually, I'd hope that you're also a hydronic expert to know how to hook them up, because there's a lot of ins and outs and things that you need to be aware of. Air traps. You've got your different valves you have to put on. Your circulator's got to be put in the right direction in the right place. All comes in your expansion tank. If you're going to pressurize your systems, then you have the expansion tanks on the system so that it has a place to expand. So there's a lot of stuff that you need to understand and know about it. So if it's just like, I'll just stick this pipe over here, stick this one on here, and you be good, well, not such the case. There is some training involved in it.
Not is the case. So find someone that understands hydronics.
Yeah.
So what we talked about is the 2020 EPA guidelines for outdoor furnaces, and this is the Environmental Protection Agency guidelines. And see, when EPA came into play with wood stoves back in the 80s, outdoor furnaces were not included. They were exempt. Okay, but as the use of wood boilers grew in some areas of the United States, it led to concern that the smoke they produced could have significant health impacts on area residents. In 2007, the APA launched a volunteer program to encourage outdoor wood boiler manufacturers to redesign them to burn cleaner. Through that program, manufacturers redesigned their outdoor boiler models to make new units available that are now 90% cleaner. Now, this is what comes into play today, this year. And James, this is what we're talking about now. In May of 2020, step 2 of the emission guidelines were implemented. Wood burning devices like outdoor furnaces could emit no more than 2.0 grams per hour of particulate matter to be EPA certified. To meet the standards, outdoor wood furnace manufacturers were required to be tested and certified by internationally accredited laboratories and certification facilities. Once certified, a permanent label is required to show that they meet EPA certified regulations. So these are the federal guidelines on these units. Now, in addition to this, there are some locales, like we were just talking about New York State and in Connecticut. There are certain counties and cities that have outlawed the use of these appliances in their areas of jurisdiction. So you want to be aware to check this. Also, there have been cases of litigation where people have sued their neighbors over having one of these in their yard, and they claimed it was damaging their health and hurting their property values. So the thing is, Tom, you live out in the corn country, right, Tom?
Yes, I do.
You don't live in a subdivision.
Like I said, my neighbor's like I said, he probably 50s, about 75 yards, maybe almost 100 yards across the street. So he's my closest neighbor.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. But you don't have a bunch of people like
No,
that. I've been to your house, and it's going through a lot of cornfields in Iowa to get to your house from Fairfield. You're not right in the middle of town.
no,
So
no.
the thing I want to make people aware of, if this is something you're interested in, don't spend this money, because this is not going to be an inexpensive proposition.
Mm-mm.
You may well find out that the installation costs more than the appliance, Tom. Would you agree with what I'm just saying about that?
And the price of copper these days, Jerry. Oh yeah.
With the,
I'm almost half tempted sometimes to cover up my copper pipe that are in here, for the amount of 3/4 and 1 inch. I'm looking right now at what I have and boiler taps and everything that I have involved there. I've got a serious fortune wrapped up into it. But then again, too, I'm snug as a bug in a rug. So,
Right.
and I've learned how to work around it. So, yeah,
Right.
it's you're exactly right. You can run if it's, I think this last one I paid for was like about 12,500. And had I not had all the other stuff into it, I probably would have dropped another 2 or 3,000 easy, easy. And
Well,
if you
I
had to put
know.
pipe in the floor, that gets could be
Well,
five,
I
six,
know.
8,000.
Right, Tom. When I installed mine, I had about $7,500 invested in the boiler. Okay.
Yeah,
And then in the installation between the labor and the materials, it took the total installation cost up to about
yeah,
$15,500 when I got it installed. Now, I was also a dealer, so I was buying at dealer cost. That was my cost to get it done. But
yeah.
it's not highly unusual for somebody to spend in today's money, in today's world, it would not be out of order that says somebody could spend 25 to $30,000 on one of these for a total system, depending on how many appliances they're going to hook up. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, and also too the availability of PEX components now, Jerry, have reduced that, but the labor and stuff involved in getting all your zones and getting them set up, and if you're gonna use plate heat exchangers and things like that, which I'd probably recommend, and pressurize your systems, expansion tanks, yeah, it doesn't take long to rack up some bills. But again, maintaining it and keeping it up and going, you will get no finer heat.
No,
You
and
know,
like I said, the reason I put it in is our propane bill that year, we had propane heating the house, and our propane bill was so enormous, and we were able to get free wood. In other words,
mhm.
we have a lot of people that cut trees for a living, and they need somewhere to dump the wood. And so I never paid for any wood. In fact, we had to put a chain up to keep people from dumping wood. We'd come in and somebody dumped 3 dump trucks of load and it's just scattered everywhere. So we had to put a chain up to keep people out of our woodlot, Tom. Yeah.
I was trying to rely on the Amish out here, Jerry. There's one guy I had last about 2 years ago. He was cutting wood, cutting all white oak. They were being into slabs like about 36 inches long, and they're all split and cut to size because they were using for wine casks. So they actually made the blanks. They actually got the oak from Iowa, cut it down to size. Then it was shipped to Indiana, where they would then finish up the process of making wine barrels out of it. But there was these culls from the outside of the log, and they're just this big, and it's just easy to carry. The 36 inches long. Just toss these things in, flip them back and forth, and they worked really great. But so I got to go find him again. I heard he was inundated with building barrels. So yeah, my neighbor's about 20 miles south, or there's a whole Amish community down there. So when I'm looking for wood or coal, or I go see the Amish. So
Okay. So, Tom, I want you to reinforce the 2 things I got up here because everyone that works with these and knows this, these are key. You want to use good fuel. These are not garbage disposals.
no,
This is not the place to throw your household garbage. Also, treated lumber. You don't want to be burning your trash, your cardboard, any of these type of things. That's not what this is made for. And the other is to have the right chemicals and to check your pH and always make sure that you're properly balanced. Is there any other advice you got for people to give them a long life out of these boilers?
I guess the big thing is the fuel. If you buy in a year in advance, unfortunately, I used to be able to have a year's supply always here all the time. So now I have to look for somebody new to get firewood, which is a bit of a bummer. But um, yeah, it's boy, when you have good fuel. Right now, I'm burning a hedge or locust, dark, black locust, and man, I tell you what, that stuff is like unbelievable, and it's kind of nice. I've burned soft maple, hard maple, walnut, ash, and all of them have the difference. But without a doubt, this this locust is like it's like I don't know 24,000. I don't know whatever it is, Jerry, but it's like burning coal. But once
Yeah.
it gets going, it is unbelievable. So again, fuel makes a huge difference on what kind of effects you have with it. You can burn clean. I'm testament that you can, and you can do dirty too. If you get lazy and don't care, it can become a problem. But I've also seen people do the same thing with wood stoves too, Jerry. You and I both run across that. People don't burn them well. They try to burn them out or whatever, and they start them up in the morning with a bunch of paper, and they send smoke all over the neighborhood. So it all comes down to basically good stewardship of your fuel.
Right. So you're satisfied that these do a good job for Tom Urban. Am I correct?
They do a good job for Tom Urban. Like I said, right now my propane's about 220. I don't know if I went on a contract this year or not. I don't think I did. So, I'm anticipating with the fuel I do have, I probably should be able to get through my coldest amount of winter, without using hardly any propane at all. So
Okay.
when it's
What
all
do
said and
you do?
done.
Okay. So there's also another consideration, which is how often do you put fuel in yours, Tom?
And that's a big one, Jerry, because I probably load mine. I've got one of those like, oh, it's a Rubbermaid thing, but it's like a garden weight cart, and I probably I can put two, sometimes three in a day, but I try to load mine at least about 4 or 5 times a day. I don't stack it all up in one day and let it burn down. I usually try to put 6, 8 pieces or 10 pieces of wood in at a time, cross blank, or sometimes I just toss them in, and that also helps the amount of um,
Okay.
yeah, smoke.
I got to ask this too. Do you still have to get up in the middle of the night and put wood in that thing? I can remember you telling me one time that you were out there like 1 or 2 o'clock every morning loading wood into it. What about now? What's your schedule?
Um, get up in the morning. I don't usually if I go to bed, I'll like about 9 or so. I'll make sure I go out there and go throw some pieces in to get me through the winter. I don't get up at 2 or 3 in the morning anymore. If that's the case, let the propane. I'm getting too old for that stuff. But yeah. So and then usually by mid morning I'll throw some in. So in early afternoon I'll throw some in, and then around 5 or 6, and then again. So I probably was like about 4 or 5 times a day. You know,
Okay. What about if y'all go out of town? What do you do?
Um, that's a little bit of a tough one, because it is an outdoor system, and I don't run glycol in it. So we have to make sure that somebody's here just to keep it going. I mean, I could use all my propane heaters and stuff in here and just go on auxiliary with those. So the building's gonna be okay, but I still have to have somebody come in here, just throw some, come out and throw some wood to keep it going, so I can keep my water up above 60 degrees.
Right. So that's a key consideration
It
too.
is.
If you travel, it was like when I started traveling a lot. So, my wife, I don't believe that she's going to go up there on top of that hill and put them 5 foot logs in that boiler at night. Do you?
If you do, take pictures. Take pictures.
Take pictures, document that one, got you.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, Bob.
So, anyway, the whole purpose of the night show was to share with you information on water stoves, boilers, whatever you want to call them. They are considered outdoor appliances. People do install them on the indoors at times, they put them inside their houses. But again, you got some safety precautions. Keep in mind, what are you going to do if the fire comes out of that door whenever you're loading it? You got it sitting in your basement on an 8 foot ceiling, because I've seen fire go higher than 8 foot out of that. Tom, what about you?
If I hadn't had the building on it, I probably have done it at least once or twice. Yeah, it,
Yeah,
it, it can come out of that door pretty quick.
right. You also do not want to scrimp and buy inferior pumps,
Mhm.
inferior pipes, or anything else. This is something. So, Tom, 30 years ago, you installed a lot of the supply systems, and most of that is still working today. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And what I did hear you say is you do replace a pump, you get a couple years out of your pumps, those kind of things like that. Is
Mhm.
there any other replaceable items in the system besides the pumps?
Now that I've pressurized them, I had to put just sometimes you have to check expansion tanks. I did have from you see, I have to worry about condensate. That expansion tank went bad on me a little while just last year, and it was only in there for about 3 or 4 years. And sure enough, on the back side of it against the wall, it had eaten away. And I was wondering why it wasn't working. The pumps weren't running right, and something wasn't wrong. And sure enough, the expansion tank had rotted out. So there is some maintenance to these things. So it's like a yearly thing, Jerry. You just have to kind of go through, get your water tested, make sure that your pHs and your nitrate levels are correct. And just it's hydronic heating. It's kind of like a never. It's what it is.
Right. And the same water is going to stay in it. You're not going to drain this water.
Mhm.
It's just like your swimming pool. You're going to have the same water in
Mhm.
there year after year after year. You just got to make sure you keep the right chemicals in it, keep it balanced, check your pH on occasion. all of those kind of things. And if you do that, these units can give you a really long life. If you
Yeah.
use the wrong fuel, you don't have the chemical balance, everything is off, then you may have a shortened life. And these are some really costly repairs.
Mhm.
You really don't want to just go down and buy a new boiler because you didn't check your chemicals, do you, Tom?
No, that's a bad road to hoe. I mean, you're blowing a lot of money. If you really go back and look at the cost of propane, propane's $4 a gallon or more. Maybe you can get away and do something stupid like that. But as a rule, because it is an investment, so if you take care of the investment, it'll pay you back tenfold.
That's it.
That's the real big thing is you just have to understand that it's a living thing and you got to take care of it.
Yep. Well, we appreciate you folks tuning us in tonight. We come in every week. If you have questions about a fireplace, about a chimney, about your gas logs, your wood stoves, then you've got my email address here. Every week I come up, and some weeks I'm just answering questions from consumers where they've sent it. Questions about their fireplace. It could be anything. So write my email address down. If you have a question we can answer, hey, I'll be glad to do it. I love to get subject matter experts like my friend Tom Urban here. So, Tom, I appreciate you taking time out this evening to be with me here, brother.
It's
And I'll
good.
see you down the road. I'm sure we'll be talking again probably later this week.
All right, take care, Jerry. It's good seeing you. Say hi to everybody.
You got it, folks. We appreciate it. And our Fireplace Show is a production of CBC Success Group. My name's Jerry Isenhour, and I look forward to being able to help you with any of your questions about any of these things that we've talked about. And with that, we'll see you on the next show. Appreciate you joining us.